And so, on to round 5 at the Black Sea Grand Prix on Russia's coastline. The first 4 rounds have yielded some quite interesting results. Diamond winning the first two, and then Rossini coming back in the next few races. So, with that out of the way, what would round 5 bring for the championship? The Black Sea Grand Prix, known for its high speed straights and quite interesting corners, is going to be a bit of an interesting challenge for the teams this time out. And with the cooler temperatures as well, tires could be a factor as well. And the weather could also play a factor as well, as this track is well known for. A few more teams brought some more updates to their cars, mainly some more engine tuning, gearbox tuning, and a few bringing some new brakes to try out some new brakes or suspension layouts to try out, as the middle part of the season is quite tough on both of those parts. Qualifying would yield some surprises as it often does in this series, especially with these new rules. With row one of the grid being taken up by Zoe Sharp on pole position with Dieter Wexler alongside. Nina Holtz and Sarian on the second row with Surikov and Aki Lippinen on row 3. A good job for Aki Lippinen. Vasquez on row 4 with Chapman down in 8th place. Iker Vidal, a credible P9 in the Lucky Strike Cosworth car. Gonzalez and North on the strategic front row, as it's often called. With Hammerin up in 14th, Atia 15th, Blanc 16th, 17th for Cyril Lundquist in the Valan. Some of the mid to backfield cars have pretty good qualifying results. Rick DeGraff did not have a good qualifying result, starting 20th. Jeremy Woodford managed to be off the back row for a change, as Ricky Casserly and Wolfgang Schmidt were on the back row. So, with that out of the way, it would be an interesting race indeed, with a Panther on pole position, the other Panther being the home race hero, and several other cars and drivers in very good positions for the race. And with weather potentially a factor, it was time to see who would get the jump into turn 1 for the race. The 5 lights came on for the Black Sea Grand Prix with a very interesting front row indeed. The lights went out, and it was immediately trouble for the second row of the field, with Holtz and Sarian trying to block each other into the kink of turn 1 and making contact. Several other drivers also had trouble going into turn 2, which was the first real braking zone on the track. Rick DeGraff went off the road. Iker Vidal made contact with Nikolai Surikov and had damage. Nina Holtz was running around with a damaged suspension after contact with Sarian. Sarian had spun down to 18th place. Lippinen was also in the wars. Prachipatia went off the road. Lucia Flores was in the wars, meaning both Rosardo Corsas were involved in the lap 1 melee. And Prachipatia drove off the road. Quite a chaotic start, which did not help matters at all, as many drivers had either suspension damage, flat tires, or other damage to their cars, which necessitated repairs at the end of lap 1. Although lost amongst the chaos was the running order, as Sharp smoked her tires into the final corner at the end of lap 1 to lead the race. Vasquez was up into a surprise third. Olivier was 5th. Hammerin in the Asia Road Racing car up into a shocking P6. Blanc was up in the top 10, and Cyril Lundquist also gained a massive amount of places, as the walking wounded left the pit lane at the end of lap 1 onto lap 2 with damage repaired to their cars, although several still having penalties or investigations lingering over their heads. One of those drivers in question was Nikolai Surikov, who, unfortunately for him, suffered the worst fate: a drive-through penalty at the end of lap 2, which put him dead last on the field. Not a great home race for him. After that, things settled down a little bit, except at the front 3, with Sharp leading the way, Wexler having snuck up into second off screen as everybody was focused on the walking wounded, and then into first at the end of lap 6, leading the pack ahead of Chapman. The front 3 were fighting hard, and it was going to be interesting to see which one of these 3 would win. All 3 cars seemed to be fairly equal to each other, and it was and it was skill across each individual lap, making the difference on who was ahead. Further back, Jono Hamron was also making his presence known, keeping pace with the Windsor in front of him, and also holding out the Van Dorp BMW behind him for 6th place at the time. Hamron was doing quite a good job, but things were about to get thrown for a curveball. On lap 11, that weather came into play, with rain starting to show up. The front three stayed out for another lap at the end of lap 11. However, the rain was starting to get harder as most of the field chose to stay out. Someone who was flying as the track began to get damp was Samuel Blanc, neatly pulling a move on Nilo Sarian. Granted, Sarian's tires were also fading, but Blanc was flying in the Thornton Lambo car. Could he make a difference as he charged his way up into 7th place as the rain hit? At the end of that lap, the leaders all pitted, with Sharp losing ground and dropping down to 3rd place, with Chapman taking the lead thanks to a slick pit stop from the Steinman crew, as the rest of the field poured into the pit lane, nearly going 3 wide at one point, with Moreno and Ricky Casserly involved in the shenanigans on pit road. Blanc, Coro, and Gonzalez were the only 3 to stay out at the end of lap 12, but they would be swiftly in at the end of lap 13 for intermediate tires, as it looked like the rain was going to stick around for a while. Not a particularly heavy drizzle, but enough for the intermediates to be needed, as the slick tires would be hopelessly useless on the wet surface. As Blanc and the other 2 came out of the pit lane, Blanc managed to hold on to 7th place, with Sarian still 8th, and Hamron still in the points for the time being. Nina Holtz was also making up ground now that with the weather change. Her car, showing superior grip to most of the others still, at being a Steinman of course, was charging through the field, although her charge was getting stymied by some of the midfield cars like Maria Gonzalez and Oliveira, who didn't seem quite inclined to get out of her way. And why would they? They were fighting for a point just like Nina Holtz was, and they had their own championship battles to fight as well. Meanwhile, back up with the front 3, Sharp, Wexler, and Chapman were still trying, all 3 trying to see who could get an edge over the other. They were still very evenly matched, much to everybody's surprise, as most people thought the Panther was still a front-running car, but still slightly inferior, and that Sharp had just pulled a mighty lap in qualifying. However, Sharp was trying to prove something here, it appears, as she kept pushing very hard, trying to keep with the front 2. Eventually, after several laps of everybody just tiptoeing around on the intermediate tires, the rain stopped and the track dried. Javier Vasquez and the two Lucky Strike Cosworth cars, both of them having nothing to lose after the lap 1 shenanigans, came in for dry tires first to try to test the waters and also see if they could gain anything. Wolfgang Schmidt also came in, but was unseen by the cameras. Then on the next lap, the front 3 all came in, with Sharp getting the jump on Chapman and Wexler, jumping from 3rd to 1st. Slick work from the Panther crew. And Vasquez's early stop also played into his hands as he jumped to Nilo Sarian to take 4th place back. Samuel Blanc was still in the points. Hammer was down to 10th after dropping back in the intermediate period off screen. Jenny North was up into 12th, and there was a variety of strategy going on as well. Mediums, hards, and softs were scattered across the field. The mediums could go most of the way through most of the rest of the race. However, it would require another stop. Same with being on the soft tires. However, the hard tires could make it to the end. Although that didn't seem to matter for the front 2, as Chapman bullied his way by Sharp at lap 33, the midpoint of the race, with Wexler lurking just behind. But it would be interesting to see how strategy would play out. But as the laps kept clocking away and the soft runners inevitably pitted for new tires as they wore out, the front 3 on their medium tires were still charging, Sharp included, pulling the same move on Chapman at the end of lap 42 to take the lead back. Much to everybody's surprise, The Panther, while a decent car in the corners, was still lacking a tiny bit of power on the straights, and it was quite surprising to see Sharp just drive up to the back of Chapman, and then just simply dive bomb him and get by. And then strategy came into play. Chapman came in at the end of lap 44 for soft tires in an attempt to get the undercut on Sharp and pull a fast one to take the lead on track position. Would it work? At end of lap 46, Zoe Sharp came in. Soft tires went on her car as well, and away she went. Although she would be at several seconds behind Chapman, 4 seconds to be in fact, as most of the action in the midfield had died down and the fight was up at the front of the field. Meanwhile, lap 49, with Wexler still yet to pit, Ricky Castley became the first actual retirement of the race with a boost on tech engine failure. A disappointment for him. And at the end of that lap, Wexler came in for his soft tires. With the slight offset of tires and the known fall off of the soft tire at the end of its lifespan, and with a decently long stint for the front three to take place, it would be interesting to see if they could hang on. Meanwhile, further back, Anna Olivier was making some noise in the midfield, having stopped again for a fresh set of tires. She charged her way back up into 8th place and then set her sight on 7th place Jenny North. Meanwhile, with 3 to go, while that was happening, with 3 laps to go, things were closing up. Wexler was closing on the 2 cars in front, while Sharp and Chapman were starting to fade on their older tires. And to make things even more dramatic into the mix, there was lap traffic ahead. Chapman was stuck in between the lap car of Iker Vidal in 19th and the other car right behind him, the Thornton of Alejandro Moreno. Both on slightly fresher and harder tires than Chapman and Sharp were, and both since they were matching the leader's pace, not obliged to move out of the way. In fact, Alejandro Moreno unlapped himself from the race leader, which didn't help things at all, as Sharp could now see her target very clearly and was charging. Meanwhile, while Sharp was closing in directly in front, Moreno was now trying to put the pressure on Iker Vidal for a lowly 19th place. Again, both locked in their own battle and refusing to get out of the way. Chapman was trying to gain ground, and in the middle sector, it looked like he might have a chance, as Moreno tried to make a move on Vidal and failed. But Sharp was now right on the back of the Steinman again, and unseen behind them, Wexler had already closed in 2 seconds on the second-to-last lap. Coming to the final lap, Moreno once again tried to pull a move on Vidal to the inside in the final corner, and this time he made the move stick. Iker Vidal was now directly in front of the leaders. Sharp was now directly right behind Chapman, and then beside him, and then into turn 2, ahead of Chapman going into the long quadruple left-hander. However, Sharp got on the marbles on the outside and trying to avoid Iker Vidal on the inside, left the door just wide enough open for Chapman to make a 3-wide move and take the lead back with just over half a lap to go. Incredible driver from the Steinman driver. However, it wasn't over though, as Wexler continued to close in off screen, closing to within 2 seconds now, as Vidal yielded to the leaders and Moreno began to pull away in front. There was nothing between them. Down the hill to the final corner, Sharp simply just drove right by the Steinman, as the Steinman began to stutter as he was low on fuel. Shocking, but just enough to be able to hold on, though. Coming out of the final corner to win the race and put herself back in contention for the championship by putting a stunning drive over Harry Chapman. Wexler would end up finishing third, 2.3 seconds behind the leaders after being a staggering 10 behind at one point. Sarian ended up recovering to fourth after a fairly anonymous race. Holtz's comeback drive ended in finishing fifth, a decent result regardless for her. Vasquez 6th, Olivier 7th, North, Gonzalez and DeGraff 8th, 9th, and 10th, with Blanc frustrating in 11th, Schmidt 12th, Hammon's a credible 13th after his heroics earlier in the race, and Surkov a disappointing 15th after a home race quite literally from hell.